So as a person involved in this research and been traveling around the world, seeing so many research teams, research groups, businesses that are getting involved, it's my feeling with a clear evidence, electrospun nanomaterials is globally growing and there is an international appeal to this particular technology. If you want in terms of numbers, I think say in 2000 there would be less than 5 companies. Now we have nearly more than 50 companies around the world. It's a classical example of a technology that was invented say 100 years ago, but somehow kept in the room, locked, and keys were thrown away. But last 10, 15 or 20 years, many scientists, engineers discovered those keys and trying to find an interesting applications. A lot more need to be done. Okay, so these are basically to illustrate some of the real applications in the market space. You do see them in terms of the filters, air filters, scaffolds for tissue engineering, fishing rods, water filters, especially the point of go, water type of filters, and then you have a sound absorbers, and vascular grafts. This is for the dialysis patients, for taking the blood out, purify it, put it back into the human beings. So these are good examples. You can find them on the internet as well as the companies they market. You also see new startup companies are being set up. For example, Nanofiber Solutions. They say there is a space in affinity filtration with the focus that biopharmaceutical industry is moving from traditional synthetic chemicals to the proteins and peptides for treating newer forms of diseases or treating the existing diseases in a better way. So they again make use of high surface area fibers which can be functionalized so that they act as an adsorptive media for these proteins, antibodies and nucleic acids. So you see that people placing bets on affinity membranes kind of technologies. Okay, so what I feel, it's not an accurate one, but I feel somehow around 2000 there's a lot more focus. Since 2000, year 2000, there's a focus on application for a technology that is very well known. So you see in the universities around the world, including my own university, now we have much larger electrospinning machines than we normally have, tabletop, simple machines. So these are, you find such machines in several labs around the world. Similarly, you would also see, okay, now portable electrospinner, again there is certain technological challenge involved in terms of the high voltage system, but everything has been compressed in a very small handheld portable electrospinner. You see that someone making it and marketing it. So in order to not to disappoint you and also capture all the work that you've been doing in your own laboratories and the companies, here is an illustration. Where does the promise of electrospun nanomaterials in diverse sectors? You could see them from filtration separation, textiles, medical applications, composites, nanomaterials, energy, food and nutrition. If you notice, I have 4 columns which are basically to say it could be near term, short term to the long range within each of those domains. So there's a lot of research going on, there's a lot of product development that's happening around the world. So where do I see the gap? There is a gap clearly. The gap is between research to the viable products. Okay, the gap is coming to be slowly to be bridged. You could see it took me a couple of clicks. Essentially, I believe there's not enough resources for commercializing scalable prototypes. You also see there's not enough performance data. While there's a lot of papers that are reported in the literature, especially the scientific journals, we're still not matching the market needs, what exactly the market pull, and also 360-degree better performance over the competing solutions. Like my previous speaker said, for any challenge or any issue, there is always a combination of technologies. And when you put combination of technologies together, it's not quite obvious how you push one particular technology for sure. And then you also have a stronger involvement of businesses in creating markets. That's also lacking, which is the reason why there is a gap that exists between electrospun research and actually seeing in the real world. And often we focus on one of the key indicator, which is the productivity. And here is a comparison between spun-bond, melt-blown, and electrospinning. And as its definition, it is a thinner fibers. Obviously, the base weight would be smaller, thickness would be smaller, web thickness would be smaller. But more important is the production speed. It's much slower compared to the other two stronger, well-established technologies. But that's not the complete answer. And also, people are concerned about handleability because of the thin fibers. These are often cited as possible reasons which serve as a bottleneck for this technology to take off. But in my view, while they could be the limitations, there would be an asset. The main asset here is the flexibility of materials that could be electrospun. And as you can see, polymer, ceramics, oxides, high aspect ratio structures, and then composites as well as carbon, both in fiber form as well as a particulate. And such diversity of material systems and the flexibility that provides you opens up new opportunities. And I deliberately chose this word, moonshots. And when I prepared this slide, the idea was try to see whether I can come up with some new directions, not commonly explored. But they are moonshots. That means they would take time to realize it. But when you do realize it, they would have a significant impact on the societies. That's what we call moonshot technologies. But then when I Google moonshot, there is lots of other meanings there. So I wanted to make sure I mean the same thing as what I said. So I put the definition there. The moonshot, what I meant is really on the technology side. Okay, let's look at what are the moonshot options. For example, offshore industry that involves renewable energy as well as offshore oil and gas exploration. These industries are going towards much further inside, as well as they would need power transmission or electricity supply more depth. So for example, current power transmission in subsea systems, let's say it's 2 kilometers below the sea surface, we are talking about 3 kilometers. Adding another 1,000 meters. Another 1,000 meters of depth when you go there, and if you want to supply electricity, it's a total different challenge. I show you in a minute. Essentially, that's a cable, that's how it looks like. And this is how a cable is actually laid. This is quite massive cables, very heavy, and at the core of it, essentially it's copper, which is the most highly conductive. And it is wrapped around with stainless steel as well as some of the elastomers, rubber, to give the flexibility, durability, as well as the sturdiness. So the key is the copper that provides the conductivity. Can we change copper with something else that gives you the benefits of conductivity, ampacity, that means the current carrying ability, capacity, at the same time it is lightweight. So what you see here is a carbon nanotubes and a typical mechanical properties and electrical properties. And what you see on the right side is conductivity versus ampacity, that is the current carrying capacity. And if you notice, the metals have a very high conductivity, but when it comes to the ampacity, they're not that great. So carbon nanotube has that higher ampacity, but not necessarily very good in terms of the conductivity because it has a lot of defects when you make carbon nanotubes. Also, to make carbon nanotubes which are several long, like 3 kilometers, still such technology doesn't exist. So if we can make carbon nanotube wires or bundles, you still have to deal with an issue of between carbon nanotube strands. How does the electrons move? And how do you improve this optimization of the properties? So here we are looking at future cables where you actually electrospin carbon nanotubes and produce long cables. And next slide, please. So the idea is you will reach an ampacity levels much higher than copper, but the conductivity levels, even if you reach close to 50% of the current copper, and at the same time you improve the tensile strength or mechanical property twice, you are now fundamentally reducing the weight of power cables. Think about it. So if such a technology really materializes, it will have enormous impact on the electricity transmission supply in offshore industry. At the same time, other industries that would need such technology. As I said, it's a moonshot. It takes time. But this was funded. Recently, we were competing for this money. There is a foundation called Lloyd's Research Foundation. Myself, and there is a professor from Cambridge University, and Masaya Kotaki from US. We won the project, several $1 million, and we were competing with the Nobel Prize winners. They also had even much better ideas. So finally, this is one of the projects that got funded. So a few years down the line, it could be just a dream, or it could be we would probably make some progress. But nevertheless, this is how one could envisage how electrospinning can be adopted to come up with something more interesting. Next one, please. Next one. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through the details because in the literature, lots of people have been spinning carbon nanotubes blended with polymers, trying to make yarns and filaments. So these are the literature information that's already there. Next one, please. The other area, I think, is smart homes, nanocomposites in construction industry and building industry. So if you notice, there are two major things are happening. One is urbanization. More people are moving to the cities. You need the future dwellings in the cities which are more comfortable in terms of the noise management, in terms of the durability, in terms of the lower carbon footprint. And how do you make those kind of materials? That means you are reinventing cement and concrete such that delivers much higher performance with lesser materials. Perhaps you don't use steel there. Can you imagine that? Not easy. Well, so we are working with a company which is an American company, but in Singapore, you actually see the blocks of concrete, which has these nanofibers, carbon nanofibers, and what we found was it actually delivers much higher performance in terms of sound management, mechanical properties, durability, permeability of water, resistance for the water permeability is much better. So it's being tested now. Also, if you are thinking of building, say, a few-story buildings in a very short period of time, this provides the technology. At the same time, you are also looking at low-cost housing, which is needed in many developing countries. So again, there is an opportunity for us to explore and apply electrospun nanofiber systems. So we are doing this kind of work now. Next one. So I think there's an excellent example. These guys from New Zealand, they claim they actually have this nanopods in Google, which is meant for the sound management. Especially if you sit inside that electrospun nanopods, there's less noise from the next neighbor cubicle. Probably you can focus better. So that's what they claim. They basically say when you have these finer fibers and more packed, somehow it manages the sound and it gives a better scenario. Next one, please. This, of course, I also believe electrospray coatings have a role in terms of the self-cleaning systems. This is the work which we did some years ago, where you are looking at self-cleaning systems, which provides a unique opportunity for removing dust, keeping the surface much more durable, with the unique functionalities. Next one, please. Then I move into polymer composites industry. Next one. You can click, yeah, click again. As you can see that there is a role for the thinner fibers in addition to the conventional reinforcement fibers. The idea is you can improve the fracture toughness, delamination resistance, impact damage tolerance by having these fibers which form the bridges which cracks might be propagating. There's already concepts in the literature. For example, next slide. Here you see that people talk about a self-healing composites. Alex Seeram worked on it, plus many others. Here is core shell bicomponent systems where you have an active ingredient. There's another active ingredient that is distributed in the matrix. When stress levels increase a point, it opens up, it releases this possibility for reaction, and there is a crack closure, thereby providing a better damage tolerance. So it's what you can imagine, self-healing composites using core shell nanofibers, which would be used in addition to the conventional micron size fibers. Next one. So we move on to the core of these composite technologies. Many of these transportation planes, aerospace industry, they use carbon fiber reinforced composites, carbon fiber reinforced epoxy, carbon fiber reinforced PEEK composite systems. And if you notice, these carbon fibers are primarily T300 type of carbon fibers, and they have a high strength, specific stiffness. And that's the reason why they use these materials. Next slide. So recently, if you notice, there is a progress from T300 carbon fibers to T1000 carbon fibers. And these T1000 carbon fibers are much stronger, stiffer than the T300. The main reason is, you look at the surface morphology of T300 and T1000, the surface is much smoother. So there is a less amount of defects which were created during the spinning from the pan system, these materials, from the precursor material. Next one. So what it means is, if you move from T300 to T1000, you're also reducing the fiber diameter from 7 microns to 5 microns. So by enhancing the surface, by reducing the number of defects on the surface, by reducing the thickness, you are actually enhancing the mechanical properties of carbon fiber. But none of the current technologies, you can go below certain thickness of the fibers. Let's say in this case, we are talking about a starting material is 10 micron spinneret. So if you want to go much finer spinnerets and produce a finer, thinner fibers, especially carbon fibers, perhaps there may be a role for electrospun systems. Again, something one needs to consider very closely. Next one. Then I move on to the other area which is also picking up is the piezoelectric nanofibers. Some reason by electrospinning, PVDF, which is a standard workhorse material in the water filtration, you are aligning localized microstructures and the molecules, and what you find is this beta phase seems to have much better preferred orientation that provides higher crystallinity and also provides higher piezoelectric properties. And next slide. So what you see is that some of the configurations that are happening, and you also see Google talking about Project Jacquard, where you have this fabric-based systems which are made of piezoelectric fiber systems that would generate a certain amount of electricity or voltage that are needed for the wearable microelectronic devices. Next one. So here is an evidence for you to see. A number of people working on PVDF, including ourselves. We've been working on these PVDF systems. You look at the trend in terms of the publications. So it is slowly picking up. using electrospinning, standard conventional PVDF, can you make piezoelectric systems, piezoelectric fibers which are much more flexible compared to the PZT systems. At the same time, you deliver performance. You notice the peak voltage, which compared to PZT and PVDF, you would see they're comparable in terms of the voltage output for similar mechanical loading. So you are again seeing an opportunity to develop sensors or better systems using electrospun systems. Next one. I want to switch from those to the healthcare, and most of you, including me, care about the health, and you may not agree with me. I think we are designed to live up to 120 years. Some of you wish to live probably 150, 200 years or maybe forever, but roughly we are designed to live up to say 120 years. Average lifespan is about 85. The healthy lifespan, you minus off 10, which is basically 75. There are exceptions. I'm not saying there is no exception. There are always exceptions to this one, but this is a worldwide trend. So what happens to us is the independency. After you reach that age, after the middle age, somehow we become more dependent. Click on it, please. So what we all want is we live totally independent. You go to the bed, next day you don't get up. Right? That's all we want, isn't it? Anybody wants anything different? No, right? Okay, next one. The solution lies in, of course, lifestyle, but in addition to lifestyle, it also depends on these things. Regenerative medicine, controlled drug delivery, medical device and implants, imaging and diagnostics, and something called electroceuticals. So these are the solutions in addition to the lifestyle choices you choose. So all these areas, you actually have electrospinning potential. So I don't have time to go through every one of them, but I will illustrate few examples. Next one, please. So those of you not familiar with regenerative medicine, essentially you have cells which need to be multiplied. Then you have the regenerative biomaterials, what we call electrospun biomaterials. You put them together and then you provide conditions which normally exist in the human body. You bring all these three guys together, please click on it. Click again. Click again. Click again. Yes, basically regeneration. So you can regenerate your heart, you can regenerate your brain. We have grown actually the heart regeneration in our own laboratories. Brain has been reported in University of Florida recently. They have grown large chunks of brain, not the whole brain yet. Right? Look at the possibilities. And that requires these carefully engineered nanofibers. Next one, please. Okay, I clicked myself. Yes, it works. Okay, so these are the places where you already see electrospun nanofibers and number of applications. For example, trachea. This was actually implanted on the human beings already. And there are other areas where you see potential for electrospun nanofibers in regenerative medicine, healthcare. And even traditional areas like wound dressing, we normally think, what more innovation can we do? Actually, there is an opportunity. Typically, wound dressing, especially for the diabetic treatments, infection is the biggest problem. And that's why they add silver into the wound dressing. And some of the practitioners do not like silver. And they want something, an alternative to that. So by electrospinning and using certain natural compounds, you can actually cross-link these wound dressing materials without using silver, at the same time retaining antimicrobial activity. So you can see that here, there's a silver dressing. The other one, there is no silver, neither cross-linker. Because of the electrospinning, high voltages, you are actually cross-linking the polymer chains. And then you actually see much longer duration of the antimicrobial activity. So you can innovate the existing systems using electrospinning. Next one. Okay, so the other one is the stents. Normally the stents, they do the coating inside, but there's an opportunity to do the coatings on the outside, for example, electrospun coatings for long duration drug release, especially when you are concerned about restenosis. So this is a long-term release of the drug, is adhesion onto the stents. So if you're not convinced, you don't have to go with stents. Human body has lots of options. Almost every part in your body can be replaced. There are about 1 million devices now you can choose along the way. And I gave a prediction to Singapore. In Singapore, probably in 20, 30 years from now, every Singaporean would have 20% of the body replaced with these devices. Because we need them. Because our lifestyles, choices, you need a medical help. So there's lots of options. There's a huge opportunity for you to use these technologies to invent. So what I said, electroceuticals is basically you don't use chemicals. You use electrical pulses. All you do is electrical pulses and you treat the diseases. So here we are talking about Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, depression, and also some of our own organs do not listen to us after a certain point in time. So it's a big research area is coming up, what we call electroceuticals. Essentially, you take a very fine electrically conducting wires and you interface with the neurons selectively. And then you provide the stimulation so that you actually bring back those functions for that particular tissues and organs. It's a huge research area that's happening. Traditionally, they were using certain materials which are very stiff, and neurons do not like them. You really need a highly pliable materials so that neurons do not get disturbed. At the same time, they can receive those stimulation. So there's an opportunity there. You still don't believe Chinese acupuncture, which traditionally they don't use electric signals. The same acupuncture, now they're actually adding a little bit of electric signals, pulses, what they call electroacupuncture. Electroacupuncture. So the concepts are there. There's an opportunity for high aspect ratio fibers made of different materials that can deliver very fine electric signals. And then there's an area called drug screening, where you basically need the tissues, not the animals, for investigating the efficacy of the medicines. So you could produce a 3D tissues using these technologies, tissue engineering approach for drug screening. So I like this one recently. I just came across while coming for this conference. There's a paper just published where they melt spun these three-dimensional structures which could be used for seeding cells and growing tissues. So you could see the potential of the concept. So then I move into agriculture. Agriculture is an area, there's a huge potential. It is also cost sensitive, also skill sensitive, but nevertheless there is an opportunity to apply electrospun systems. So here is an example of mangoes that were preserved. That means mangoes are not coated with electrospun materials, but electrospun material is there, sitting next to them, and they release particular compound so that you would not allow the mangoes to ripe faster. So you preserve the fruit produce much longer duration. And you actually see that. Here is treated and control. Control one ripened, whereas it did not, under the normal storage conditions and a cold storage conditions. So again, such an advancement really helps farmers will have better systems, and you are talking about sustainability. And the last one is synthetic meat. And those of you probably not into this area, same concepts, tissue engineering concepts are now applied. Electrospun protein carriers you can make chicken, beef, whatnot. So synthetic meat you can produce. So you don't need animals. You make these things from the plant-based systems. So we all can be vegetarian. At the same time, you can have the taste you like. And a lot of technology companies are in this domain now. A lot of action in this area. So I guess there is a role for electrospinning, and I think it's a question of creativity and applying and also bridging the gap, which I mentioned, which is beyond just the researchers alone. The researchers and businesses have to come together so that we can bridge the gap and take electrospinning basically forward. Since I'm a guy who's been working in this area, I'm optimistic, and I'm sure some of you are optimistic as well. In my opinion, electrospun nanomaterials' future is still being created. Remember, it's a technology invented 100 years ago, but it was kept inside the room, locked, keys were thrown away for a long time. Only last 15 years, there's a lot of people getting involved, applying their knowledge and their creativity. Well, something more might come. I'm optimistic. I hope you are optimistic, and thank you.